All right, welcome, brethren, to the continuation of the Grand Lodge of Minnesota webinar series. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening in such a beautiful day to join us with the webinar series. First things first, we're not a tiled session, so make sure that you're governing yourselves accordingly. It is being recorded, and by now the recording should be kicking in. We ask that on behalf of the presenters that you keep yourself on mute during the presentation. During the course of the presentation, if any questions come up, feel free to chat that in, and as the host, I'll be taking a look at those, and there will be a time period at the end for dealing with the questions. Also towards the end, about 5 minutes before the end of the meeting, I will send out a poll. Make sure you submit it before you leave. We hope that you have enjoyed the session so far. Here's a look at the upcoming schedule. Next Tuesday, we've got Colonial Freemasonry by Worshipful Brother Andrew Niemeyer. And then we've got on next Thursday, Fundraising Beyond the Pancake Breakfast by Worshipful Brother Brad Phelps. So make sure that you're going to the Grand Lodge webpage and signing up in advance for them. In sponsorship by the committees for the Grand Lodge, we've put together a sort of challenge to the lodges this year called the Show and Tell Challenge. And what we're asking for is submissions from the different lodges around the state in basically putting together, it could be video content, essays, or any kind of thing the lodges choose to do, but answering questions that are sponsored by the different committees. So for example, what does Freemasonry mean in Minnesota to you and your lodge? The winners will receive a 2020 commemorative plaque. There is some more information available on the website, and it's listed here. And I do believe that this website is also available through the Grand Lodge's website as well. Tonight's presentation will be on the Art of Delegation by Worshipful Brothers Justin Thompson and Christopher Wendover. And then again, one more quick look at the upcoming schedule. And then also keep in mind, we've got the poll. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Worshipful Brother Chris, it's all yours.
Okay. Welcome, brothers. As the introduction said, I am Justin Thompson. I'm from Arcana Lodge in beautiful Northeast Minneapolis, and we are here to give you a little bit of a rundown on the art of delegation.
My name is Chris Wendover, and I am from Wysette Lodge 205. And like Worshipful Brother Justin Thompson said, we are literally going to give you a crash course in delegation. Our hope is to provide you with the tools to build a foundation to build upon.
Excellent. So before we get going on the delegation process, we need to establish a bit of a baseline, some of our definitions. The first one is, what is delegation? The process of assigning the right person to the right task.
Delegation is not asking for volunteers, and we need to understand that. We are encouraging people to participate, and we do that by hand selecting the right person for the right.
So to facilitate proper delegation in a Masonic lodge, it's important to have clearly defined officer roles. This helps that everyone knows the expectations, keeps people focused on their specific tasks, and eliminates overlap and confusion. Officer roles can be defined through your Grand Lodge resources, your Minnesota Masonic Manual, the Masonic Code, and also importantly, how your lodge defines these officer roles. Every lodge is going to have a specific culture that dictates what the treasurer or secretary or senior steward might do specific to his lodge.
For example, in Masonic Code, The senior warden and junior warden are tasked with essentially filling in for the master in his absence. And so it would behoove the master of the lodge to have a sit-down discussion with his wardens to understand an agenda, how to go through it. It would be a good idea to have a master of a lodge pre-print his agenda just in case these things happen. That's what we're talking about, defined roles, as stated from Grand Lodge. And then the master has his defined roles as he would like his officers to perform during the year. So understand you're balancing multiple different defined roles for our officers.
So how does delegation work in a Masonic lodge? Masonic lodge is unique to perhaps other, corporate settings in that you don't get to choose your officers, you don't get to choose your inner circle necessarily. And that can be a bad thing sometimes for people who want to assign different people or use people that maybe aren't at their disposal. But it's also good that you don't have to worry about your inner circle. You know who's coming up. You know who you're probably going to be working with your year as master or other leadership positions, as any officer in a lodge is indeed a leader.
So you really see this in a sense where your junior warden, senior warden may be tasked due to the bylaws of the lodge, due to tradition in the lodge, to say be in charge of a dinner, a committee meeting, be on the finance committee, and they may not be the greatest person to handle finances. This is the time where, as master of the lodge, we need to teach and guide, right? We need to understand that, yes, I've been presented this task to overcome. A brother struggles in certain areas, but it's my job to help him in those areas to essentially teach and learn in every station we serve in Mason.
All right, understanding your team, your strengths and weaknesses is pretty self-explanatory. Strengths can be people's natural abilities, their personal expertise in some situation, or a positive motivation to complete the task. And inversely, your weaknesses would be a lack of ability, no knowledge of the task at hand, or a negative or lack of motivation. So we've established a bit of a baseline. Let's kind of go through the delegation process step by step.
So when we look at the diagram presented to us as it's a step-by-step and start to finish of the task towards the end of the task. A step that is often overlooked or we do not spend enough attention on is evaluate and review. And what I mean by that is an after-action review. We mean by sitting down with our brethren and going through the task at hand, start to finish, what was good, what was bad.
So the first step is to choose the task. It's important to make sure, ask yourself, is this a good use of resources? A highly impactful task that may take a lot of effort is a major project, but something that has a high impact and doesn't take that much effort is a quick win and an easy task to take on for a lodge. The next step, and this is the heart of delegation, is to choose the right person. Is this person suited for the task? Again, a highly motivated and highly skilled person would probably be the best person to lead a specific task, because they can motivate those who are less inspired, but perhaps well skilled in the matter, or those that are highly skilled, that are highly motivated, but not skilled can be directed by the task leader or others at his disposal. And the next step, obviously, is to set clear goals and make sure that everyone understands what the goal of the task is. There is a fine line between delegation and micromanagement. You've chosen this team. you hopefully have some confidence in them that they will complete the task. Display that confidence. Give them the end goal and maybe some of the parameters along the way, but don't micromanage them. Let them get to their end goal as they see fit.
You're the one who picked the team. So we need to have faith in that team. And we're going to monitor them, absolutely. Give them the goal, check in on them. You've picked them for a very specific purpose to fill in each role to get this task done.
All right, next step is to implement the plan. You've got a team, they've got a task. We've discussed what the goal is. Let them go. You know, don't abandon them. Be around so that you can answer questions as they arise, but display your confidence and let them do the task as they think it needs to be done. Monitoring. Again, this is kind of similar to letting them go. You know, you don't want to micromanage. You want to keep an eye on them. You want to be a resource for them, and make sure that things are flowing the way that you think they should.
Right, it's checking in. That's all we're doing. Sometimes, yes, they're going to get off course, so we put them back on course. But this is a time to evaluate in every step in figuring out whether or not your team is on the right task to complete. And so there's a very fine line between monitoring and micromanaging. We need to understand that it's a volunteer organization.
All right, and then the final step is to evaluate and review. Figure out what worked, figure out what did not. It's important to review without bias. You know, we all think that tasks should be completed certain ways, and maybe the team found that the way you thought was best wasn't working for them, and they went another direction that you wouldn't have done and maybe don't think was the best. But look at the results. Look at what actually happened rather than saying, oh, you didn't do it the way I thought you should. You've got to evaluate without bias. A good leader, you know, everyone has blinders to certain things they're not seeing. A good leader should be able to ask the questions, what am I missing? And a good team should be able to clue the leader into what they think he may have missed.
This process when I served in the military, and we called it an after-action review. And essentially what you do is you sit down with your team and you figure out what was the plan, what happened, what was supposed to happen, what worked, and what we can improve on. This is not the time to go and say, you messed up. That's not what we're doing here. We're saying, these are things we can improve on. These are errors that we found. This isn't everybody going around the room saying, yeah, what Joe Amos said. No, every task we do, every fundraiser, every barbecue, there are multiple steps in planning. There's multiple steps in execution. Everybody can come up with something we did well and something we can improve on, right? We are there to learn something and to teach something. And if your team did a good job, a brother did a good job, tell people, reward them. We think of rewards as longevity pins and Hiram awards. Well, thank you for an outstanding job. That is an award. Going up to a brother and showing that you appreciate the effort they put in, whether it was a success or not. All right, so after action review, no matter how small it is, we always say, if we don't practice ritual, we're not going to execute it correctly. If we do not evaluate what we've done, we don't know how to grow. We're not going to know how to execute the task next time we get an opportunity. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Questions? I can't hear you, Joe.
You're muted, Joe.
Got it. All right. So thank you, Worshipful Brothers Justin and Chris, for the excellent presentation. I don't have any questions that have come in through the chat. So if at this point anyone has any questions for the presenters or for me, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. So we'll now open this up to discussion.
I have one question for you. You talked at the end about evaluating giving both a positive and negative. During the process of the delegation and while people are working on projects, is there a recommendation of doing that kind of evaluation ongoing throughout the project of how it's going, what issues are going well, what issues aren't going well, or just more towards the end and letting them go forward with everything?
I would say that that's left up to, personal leadership and how one would want to handle that personally. I wouldn't necessarily take the time to address the things, what could have gone wrong and how we could improve it, because we should have fixed the step kind of and moved forward. And it seems like, for me personally, I would rather, spend all the energy in getting the task done and then evaluating it, but you could do it either way. It's just how I learned it. Through every task, it was no matter what happened at the end, you did an after action review and you went through it, with a comb, with a fine tooth comb.
Yeah, I would say it depends on also the length of the task. If it's a short-term task, it perhaps doesn't need to be reviewed midway through, but maybe a long-term 3-month, 6-month, year-long task, maybe you set out regular intervals to evaluate, review, and correct any errors that you may see before they get out of control.
Yeah, I mean, with a long task, it might not be you think you would track it. If you were taking on, say, a mentoring task in your lodge where you were going to set up, a mentoring program, then you would trial and error be figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and you might want to be tracking that. And then you also run the risk of time and place, where just because it didn't work this time doesn't necessarily mean it won't work at a future time, right? We're constantly growing, we're constantly learning. The world is constantly changing and shifting around. A lodge could be seeing a lot of success just because of the area they're in. You see a lot of the old oil states and cities, and where the oil dried up, or precious resources like gold towns and stuff like that, lodges just dried up and vanished because the town got up and moved, right? So everything's constantly changing. So I would say you would want to track that and put why it didn't work. I think that would be the most important part, is to explain why this didn't work at this time. With lodges, I like to say we're all doing everything differently. We're not doing anything necessarily wrong. And that's why it's so hard to pinpoint this issue in masonry with membership, is because we're talking lodges, and the dynamics of lodges are just completely different from town to city to personality of the lodge, the membership of the lodge, the age of the lodge. All these factors are playing involved in this. So if those factors ever change, lodge is a ritual lodge. Well, maybe it's no longer a ritual lodge 15 years from now. Maybe that interest kind of died out, and now they're more of a fundraising lodge. Well, keeping their membership is going to be different. Hammer ritual, you're on the in group. Lodges can get cliquey in that matter.
Question. The secretary and treasurer are very well-defined jobs, and work is automatically delegated to them. But the question comes up, if either one of those officers is not performing properly with these delegations, how do you handle such a thing? Because they're essentially elected for the year. Look at the master dispose of a person that's like a secretary or a treasurer. Those are two pretty important jobs in a lodge, particularly the secretary. But that's an interesting thing on delegation. If they don't really perform, particularly with secretaries, is they get paid in most lodges. So how do you handle delegation problems or problems that things aren't getting done, which are supposedly delegated through the Masonic code and such? Interesting area to contemplate about.
Well, as secretary of my lodge, I would disagree with you slightly on the automatic delegate. Well, clearly defined delegation. I think oftentimes the secretary ends up kind of being the catch-all to all these things that aren't getting done. But to more address your question, that's a conversation the master or the officers who are noticing the secretary falling down on his job need to have with him. And, I don't know. That's a tough question, because we get to a point where the secretary either isn't doing what he's supposed to be doing, and if so, he probably shouldn't be reelected another year. And if he flat out refuses to do what he needs to do as far as spelled out in the code and the manual and the like, that can cause a problem, obviously. I think we could all agree.
Opportunity for change.
It would be an opportunity for change. I don't know what you would do with a secretary who refuses to do his job. I think in a lot of cases, the secretary is overwhelmed with stuff that isn't his job, and that's what's getting in the way of a clear performance of his actual duties. But
Agreed.
yeah, so in that case, I say the master would need to find ways to get things off the secretary's plate that shouldn't be his to deal with.
Well, do you cut his salary then?
Well, again, that's something that would have to be decided on a lodge by lodge basis.
Well,
If he's not doing what is actually his job, then we have a real problem. But if he's not doing the things that are just ending up on his desk because no one else will do them, then I think the whole lodge is at fault more than just the secretary.
Yeah, we need to, I would say first we need to make sure that that secretary understands exactly what his job, right, is to record the proceedings of the lodge. It says that right in the ritual, and make sure he's doing that. And what is it he's actually not performing? It's, you see lodges like the junior warden's supposed to set up the degrees and put together the cast list, but a lot of the times it's the secretary who does that. The junior warden, the senior warden should be actively involved in those degrees as per their officer role. So what is the secretary not doing? At that time, if you get to the point to where the secretary is violating his obligation of what he agreed to when he got installed, and I'm going to assume that's what we're talking about, then yeah, you would essentially have to go to him, and that's going to be a leadership style. I would recommend pull him aside, make sure he understands there's a reason why he's not. There's got to be a deeper issue than him just saying, I'm not doing it. It could be family. It could be he didn't expect this type of work, or he's burnt out and nobody's there to replace him. And he's like, dude, I'm doing the best I can. I just need stuff off my plate. I would say first have that conversation. And if we're just going where a guy is just blatantly foregoing his duties, then yeah, you would have to escalate it in some way, shape, or form, be it talking with your DR, going to your AD. I don't think it's an immediate call to the Grand Secretary, but I don't know, is the treasurer embezzling money? I mean, you get into concerns that way, and hopefully they resolve them at the lowest level, which is the lodge level. And people need to understand that when they're getting in line. And I think that brings up a great point. You're dealing with people, and you need to address issues as a leader in your lodge, if you want your lodge to be successful. And if you're not willing to address those issues, if it's detrimental to your lodge, then you're the wrong person to be in line. I have no problem saying that. And yeah, absolutely. The expectations need to be stated at the very beginning. What am I getting ourselves into? We need to stop with this. We do it with candidates. We're like, oh, just join. It's 1 day a month. No, that's not necessarily true. Are we taking that candidate and going to immediately ask him to get in line? Well, you need to explain these things to him, and everything should be kind of explained. And I would say if we're not doing that, then it's our fault. And most of the times, like Justin said, the secretary is just overwhelmed with work because most people don't know what their job duties are, or it's not explained to them, or it's the secretary's like, I'm not going to let all this fall by the wayside. I'm going to get it done. And then now you have just one man running the lodge.
I'd like to add too, I think it's important to have an atmosphere where the secretary gets feedback and can ask for help when needed. I mean, when's the last time you thanked the secretary for doing something?
Well, I agree with that 100%. And I would use those inconspicuous officer positions, the marshal, the Tyler, young guys trying to get in, when I say that, I mean young brothers entering the fraternity, not necessarily age, right? You're a young Mason when you join, period. I don't care how long you've lived on this planet. But thank people. It's amazing what can happen when you just go up and say thank you. 4 to 1 positive is what we teach. I work in law enforcement at the prison, and we teach this. You want 4 positives for every 1 negative. People need to understand that they're doing a good job. And if you can't articulate how somebody's doing something good in a volunteer organization, they stepped up to the plate and they started. I mean, thank you. Absolutely. We just need to do that more across the board.
Yep.
Well, a big issue these days is a lot of the younger members have a different outlook on what their responsibilities are. So you could delegate quite a bit, but how do you get these people to pick up on it? It's not like the old days.
Yes, and then you have to identify the problem, right? Is the problem that the young guy doesn't know what's going on? Because a lot of times we just shove them in the officer line and we say, hey, junior steward, your job is to cook the meal, right? We don't necessarily go into, hey, senior steward, junior steward, your job is to cook the meal. No, it's more than that. It's more than just cooking a meal. Being the junior warden, well, your job is to do ritual. You need to overlook those junior and senior stewards, right? The junior and senior stewards have stuff to do. You need to provide them with a task. As a DR, a lot of the times when you see information or the lack thereof, let's just say lack of knowledge in an officer role, it's because it's not being communicated. A lot of times people use information as power, and now you have to come to me because I'm going to give you all the resources. And that does happen. So I would say identify the problem first and then guide him. I mean, that's what we're here to do. If he doesn't understand his role and I appointed him to line, well, then it would be my job to guide him. If I'm a past master of a lodge and that senior steward and that junior steward still haven't got it in their head that 40 people are showing up to dinner and they're only cooking for 13, well, as a past master, I would guide him. Mentorship is a lifelong commitment throughout our fraternity. We are there to teach and learn and guide. And I would say if they're not doing it, then the first thing we need to do is ask ourselves if we're teaching it correctly. And if we are, well, then he's not the right person for the job. And we have to understand that not everybody who walks in the doors of our lodge is right to be an officer in our lodge. We need to understand that. Some people are more capable of planning and being behind the scenes than to be in the forefront as a leader. I think that needs to be explained to people as well. And that's what we're talking about with delegating everything.
Yeah, I agree. I would just add also, start small. So if some guy's new and hasn't proved his merit, give him a small task that if he ends up, falling by the wayside and not completing it, that it doesn't drag the whole lodge down. I use the example of ritual. I had a guy who had never done any ritual come up to me and say he wanted to do third base. I said, that's awesome, and I'd love to have you do third base. Be the C captain once, this time around, and next time around I'll put you in third base. Well, he never learned his lines. I think we can all agree the C captain is easy enough. He didn't learn it, so he didn't get to third base. You got to work your way up.
Right. I mean,
Prior
Go ahead.
to appointing to anybody, I had a talk with each person that I was going to appoint, and I spelled out the expectations, not just on the duties, but them actually showing up to lodge meetings and lodge events and stuff like that. I've said you don't have to come to all of them, but you have to make an effort. And, lodge meetings are important. Degrees are especially important. And, these are your duties. Are you willing to accept these? And I'd have a sit-down talk one-on-one with them before taking the appointments.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think a lot of the times we fault guys for what they do without giving them the expectations, so they don't even know that they're missing something. And without that knowledge that, hey, we expect this and this and this, how's he supposed to know that he's supposed to do that? I think we're bad at communication sometimes, and then read into it things that aren't there, and end up being our own worst enemy in a lot of these situations.
Our goal.
Go ahead.
Our goal should be to set up our brothers for success in every aspect of their membership, at the beginning stages, the middle stages, what path they choose, and everything like that. I mean, it's something that I truly believe that we don't communicate very well. I would say if you go back to the early 2000s, 2000 to 2010, I joined my lodge, and the guy who was sitting in the East, he'd only been a Mason for 2 years. You can't tell me that guy is going to be successful. He may manage, he may, the lodge may not implode on itself, but he's not prepared for that. A lot of times we think, oh, well, this guy, he owns a business. He should be able to run a lodge. Running a lodge is different than running a business. Those are two different things. They're incorporated. There are some things that you can use, and there are some things you can't. So it is, yeah, I would say communication's a key.
I'd like to piggyback off of those comments. We've heard a lot of discussion here about how people can be used. However, I think the most fundamental thing that happens is we have to know the person first. At our lodge, we require everyone within a week of becoming a Master Mason, they have to fill out a time and talents. Because, and I would venture to say that each one of you, men in your lodge, don't know all of their history. And for instance, you were saying running a business, but somebody that a 50-year-old man or a 40-year-old man might have had many experiences, but then we also ask them to tell us what they like to do. So you might have the experiences, and you might have hobbies, and you have what you like to do, and what's your time availability. So if we don't really, the comment I always use when I explain this to new Masons in our lodge is, I can pound a nail in with a crescent wrench. Doesn't mean I should, and doesn't mean it's going to be a good job, but I can do it. So we should, each one of you has talents. We need to find out how best to use you. And part of that, we went back and did some exit reviews from people that have left a long time ago. Asked them, why did you leave? The reason why they left is we didn't connect with them. They got put in areas of things that can they do? Yeah. Do they want to do it? No. So we need to find a good way to understand all of our brothers and then put them together for those tasks. So, as we're talking about this delegation, I think the biggest part first is to understand who do you want part of that crew. And, some people may be more interested in expanding their experiences, wonderful. But let's not put them in a situation where they're not going to like it and it's not going to do anybody any good. And then one comment, switch down to you, Frank. You talked about your secretary. We have an assistant secretary at our lodge, which secretaries love it when you've got to send out a bunch of mailings and stuff like that. We have people that can come in and help. So I don't know if that helps your situation at all.
Been assistant secretary for several years. Yeah, that works out okay. But well, this is a daylight lodge, and we have maybe 32 members now. Doesn't amount to much compared to my regular lodge for Summit. That's a lot larger job to take care of. But this idea of having a list of things people are supposed to do when you approach them for a particular job, do you get very many people that will actually accept that these days?
So I find if it's clearly identified, then yes. I mean, and I give you, I mean, there's thousands of scenarios, but for example, as a master of a lodge, when you're going to appoint somebody, one, if you've waited to 3 months prior to you becoming master of your lodge to start having conversations, you fail, right? These conversations should be happening, if possible. I understand logistically some lodges are not in that position, but you should be having them 1-2 years down prior to, right? A junior warden. And I should be informing this junior steward what my expectations are for me to appoint him. And if he's not going to agree to them, then I should say, then, that's not what I'm looking for in a junior steward, right? And put it out there. But yes, I would say, I do believe that in any time when they're clearly identified, this is what the expectation is, I think people are more willing to participate because they know what they're doing, as opposed to, hey, just do this, but what do you want me to do? Well, just put together an event. You're not really giving them any guidance there. So I would say yes, I do see them participating. In fact, I think you're more likely to get people to participate if you go up to them and say, hey, I would like you to be on this committee. More often than not, they say yes. We're in a lodge setting, in a meeting, they say, we'd like volunteers. Very few people raise their hands unless it's already an officer, right? We the time for waiting and asking is kind of got to go. We kind of need to go and say, I'm requesting your services because of this reason. And Mike, like you said, know the people, right? And in the aspects of joining the lodge, I know I've seen some lodges do this checklist, and I'm 100% for them. My question is generally, when is the checklist happening? And why is this not happening in the interview when we have somebody new, joining? Find out about them. We say we're belly to belly. This is a personal experience. This is a one-on-one. We're men getting together. Why would you not sit down and have that conversation with that man and you take the notes? And now you're exploring who he is, and he's going to get to talk to you a little bit better. Your conversation's going to start happening, right? And it's going to flow better. And then, generally that, oh, I'm into classic cars. Really, so am I. You don't necessarily have to start shoving other masonry down his throat, but there's ways to find out about people by actually talking to them, and I would just encourage that. Obviously, things are different. The perfect scenario may not ever happen, but always try to do that personal one-on-one experience. And I would say that's definitely what part of the interview is for. We kind of stated it earlier in the presentation with your hand selecting people. Again, we're not asking for volunteers. We're going and we're hand picking them. So if you're hand picking them, I would hope you know about them. you know, or you know of them. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to have the conversation with them, but go to the guy's mentor, go to his buddy in the lodge that got him, that signed his petition. We should know who's joining. We should know about them when they come to lodge. Those are the conversations we should be having at the dinner table. How was your life? What happened? Oh, I started a new venture. You know, I'm diving for gold and silver because I saw some guys out in, you know, Georgia found it, or Colorado, wherever it was. You know, I mean, you know, people's lives change, things change. And I think communication, you know, Justin, Worship Brother Justin said it earlier, communication, definitely the key in all of this. We're a social organization. We should be good at talking, you know.
And I've got, it's a couple of things. I don't want to derail the conversation. This is excellent, but a couple of things. So first of all, we've got a brother from out of state, Brother William Kittredge, from Fitchburg, Massachusetts, Aurora Lodge. So welcome, Brother William. Thank you for joining us. It's always exciting to see brethren from out of state come and join our discussions. And then the second thing, I don't want to, again, derail any conversation. By all means, keep going, but I did want to launch the poll real quick. So you can all expect to see the poll up. Make sure that you fill it out. But this has been an excellent discussion so far. Excellent presentation. Please, if any have any other questions, feel free to join in. We're happy to keep it going.
I mean, Brother Frank, I mean, you seem to have a very specific issue that is, you know, to your lodge in itself.
Well, this has been going on over the years. I've been roped into being a secretary several times because just nobody would do it. But the big question is getting people motivated to even do an officer's job. Yeah, it just seems to be degenerating every year. Maybe I'm not an up and coming lodge, but on the other hand, I don't think we're that much difference. I belong to 3 lodges, so I get some cross section of what's going on here.
I mean, that I would say that, you know, that's generally in part because the officers tend to take on the workload of the lodge, right? If you, even in active lodges, the committees are generally the officers. The officers are the ones who are, you know, it's almost like a rule, that an unwritten rule, that when you become an officer, you have to make every event that lodge has, you know. And I think by spreading out the duties and encouraging people to participate, and explaining to them what's going to happen, you know, go to a brother and say, look, I've been tasked with this. Justin, Worship Brother Justin's going to help me. Worship Brother Don Moy is going to help me. He's also on the team. We would like you to help in this aspect. And if you stay true to that and everybody does their job, then everybody will be able to share that workload. And that's asking a lot. And at no point in time are we saying, you know, we want you to all of a sudden go back to your lodge, wave a magic wand, and people are going to start doing stuff. You know, that's not going to happen. But you need to start setting that foundation where you need to change the culture of the lodge. And
let's get back to the culture thing.
Yeah.
Do a lot of people join the lodge because they want to do a lot of work?
No.
Is there
not,
something
right?
with our organization that we're trying to do too much outside of what you might call lodge work?
I would agree. I like to say nobody wants to join an organization that is unorganized, right? And that's our fault, 100%. And that's, again, knowing our jobs. If everybody knew what their job was, the master takes on a very, very significant, let's just call it an obligation. when he gets installed as master, 15 of them, I will, right? And he says, I will ensure that everyone is properly checked to make sure they are a Mason, when they come into my lodge meeting. Now the master can't actually do that. He's got too much stuff going on. But there's a Tyler's obligation. The Tyler's job is to stand in front of the door and ensure that nobody comes in who's not a Mason. Maybe it should be explained to the Tyler, right, that that's his job. That although I've taken this obligation, you assuming your role is this job.
Well, being a Tyler for 6 years now, I found very rewarding, and I probably do too much on the job. But on the other hand, I see a real problem that we're asking too much of people that are too busy in this day and age, and we're not getting participation or possibly even members.
Worship Brother Sean, go ahead.
So I guess the one question, I know what you're saying, Frank, is we do see this across all kinds of lodges, and it's not only with our organization. However, some of the steps that some have done to help decrease this issue from happening is having the tradition prevailing progressive lines, junior, senior, and master, who are constantly presenting their ideas of, during my year, if elected, this is what I want to try to accomplish. And they present it to the trustees of the lodge, who give their feedback. I think we're taking on too much. I think this is going to be a problem. I don't think this is going to be a problem. But then the trustees also, with the lodges that I've been active with, have one step further and put it back on the master's calendar of what they're taking on is, how many people have you got bought off to do all these different things so that they're covered, so that it's not the same 4 or 5 people who are going to be doing it. That helps reduce burnout. It gets buy-in from everyone, but it has to become a culture within the lodge that as you're progressing up, you need to start planning for that year, because realistically, if the way the lodge system is set up and you've done it correctly, you started at one of the lower slots in the lodge for an officer position, and you've progressed through the different chairs, provided different lectures, under the assumption that you've been able to build a rapport with all the brothers possible, so that you will get your buy-off, but also so that they will feel comfortable giving you feedback that, I think you're doing too much, or I don't agree with this. Now, granted, it's the master's final decision, but you have to start building that. And those lodges that don't have it, they need to start building it today for tomorrow. Because it's not something that you can just all of a sudden kick in right away, other than to cancel things. And when we just cancel things, when there's no real reason to cancel, you're going to have bad feelings and disharmony happening in the lodge. And this is just my feeling based on what I had happen with a couple of things I tried. And I learned the hard way. Granted, I learned from it, but I think that is one of the solutions, and it's a rather broad idea, but I think it's a cultural thing that needs to be addressed for future years, but it needs to start now.
Yeah, this is Brad Phelps. I completely agree. Those are excellent points, especially the investment and the time before you get into the East. That's so key. Just to have that roadmap, evaluate how things change, and be prepared to shave back on plans and adjust.
And Frank, I understand what you're saying, as in, like, when we bring a member in, it's overwhelming, and sometimes, a lot of times you have, different interests, why they join Masonry, the direction they want to go in, and we do. It changes from 1 day a month to 3-4 days a month very, very quickly. And I think it's not that it's impossible to do, or it's necessarily problematic. It's whether or not it's being explained for the person to prepare for it is one aspect to look at it. And then the other aspect is again, one step at a time. Yes, being an officer is not easy. Yes, it is time consuming. And no matter how you do this, I don't think that's going to change. because we're not running a meeting. We need to get away from that notion that we're running a meeting. The master does not run a meeting. He runs a lodge, all right? A society of brothers within a society, right? That's in and out of the lodge. We have duties in and out of the lodge. So we need to look at the broader scope of what that actually means. And be very, very upfront. Hey, you want to be an officer? That sounds good. You need to talk to your wife about this because we have an officer meeting and these are the expectations. We understand you're not going to be able to make it all the time, but your expectation to whether or not you show up to a meeting changes drastically from just being a member on the sidelines and a member in the officer line. And that needs to be explained. How your lodge goes about handling your brothers, and we get into some sticky stuff with appendant bodies and whatnot, and how that all looks, and there's different opinions. And I don't think anybody has a right answer. We run through that same opinion with the one day, oh, you don't get the same experience as you would if you go through the long version at a lodge. I would argue that if that lodge doesn't have a solid core of guys that'll bring them in, I'm not saying you have to be word perfect, but if you don't give that ritual experience, if your lodge can't do that and just be motivated and have that guy be just motivated to go through that degree, then what's the difference between having them go through the one day? It's a problem. And that's why we are where we are. These things have kind of fell by the wayside. Society has changed the way lodges works, the purpose of the lodge, everything has changed. What does charity mean? If you look in a dictionary from the early 1800s, the word charity does not mean donate money. It doesn't. Right? It is something to the effect of doing an act with the purpose of the receiving grace from God or something like that. I can't quote it off the top of my head right now. But
let's go on that a little further then. If that's what charity is, why are we spending so much time trying to raise money for different things as a lodge?
So that is a great question, and I would say this. Our jobs are to become better people, period, right? Masonry is supposed to teach that. And our ritual teaches that charity is one way of doing that. And how we interpret the word charity is going to be different, right? That's the great beauty of language and how it evolves over time. Now, I would say that a lodge should not be focused on just fundraising. That is one aspect of being a better person, is doing charitable work, getting into the labors, the quarries, and chipping away at a good cause. That should bring camaraderie. It should bring all kinds of things. It shouldn't be just for the sake of raising money. There should be a greater purpose. All right, but if that's all your lodge is focused on, then we're not practicing the rules of balancing our time, and that is a great symbol to balance everything, right? Where the 24-inch gauge is a tool, and an example is to balance your daily life within 24 hours. But it is a tool that we can apply everywhere. A lodge should balance everything out. There should be fun events. There should be, good down and dirty, let's get to business events. There should be good charitable events. What a lodge does that. And there are some lodges that are better at raising money and doing charity than others. And I'll throw my lodge out there, Wayzata, we're not great at doing charity. We've done some bicycle things where we've helped out with the bicycle races and stuff like that. And those things don't generally require a lot of work. It's 3 or 4 guys show up and do it. We hand out a $2,000 scholarship. You look at Excelsior Lodge, man, those guys raise thousands of dollars a year with projects, and they do it well. But that's the culture of their lodge. And they let their candidates know that we are great at fundraising. We love it. We're involved in our community. And there's other aspects as to why they are doing it. It gives them great resources. So if balance, And I would encourage any lodge that if they're just focusing on one thing, even ritual, if it's just education, 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 you're not balancing it, right? Being a Mason is being about improving yourself, period. And that's why we encourage fundraising, charitable fundraising. There's a lot of it, just in general. But that transition changed and happened at some point in time. You know, I don't know. It's going to take one person to change the culture of a lodge and stand up and say, why are we doing 8 of these? You know, why don't we replace one of them with something else? Or why don't we just take it off the table? You know, you get a lot of finance guys. It was fascinating. We had a brother who kind of did it out in, you know, physical labor. This is essentially how much money we raised, time, planning, execution. This is how much money, you know, this is what we essentially paid ourselves hourly. You know, is it worth the time? Is it a valuable, is it worth putting the work in? You know, and it should be. It should not just be, we raise some money and we can say we raise some money. You know, this is a good cause that our lodge stands behind, our community stands behind. We get a lot of support with it. That's charity, right? A selfless act.
Well,
You know, and this is Don. You brought up the idea of balance, and I think I try to, in my term as master, try to use that diligently, because I think that's a real key. Because one of the ones that we haven't talked about tonight is the brotherhood, and what I made sure that there was always some fun events that we did to bring people together, bring families together. And what that did was bring people closer together, because now even a new brother isn't as apprehensive about coming to lodge, isn't apprehensive about joining in on any kind of event, whether it be fundraising or work, as some of you guys have been saying. It's not work anymore. It's not fundraising anymore. It's getting together with your brother. And that's a big difference between we have a fundraiser coming up and getting guys together. And it really made a difference, because I got to tell you, Frank, I did not have, I mean, no lodge is perfect, but I didn't have as much problem with participation. So it's a little bit different when I'm listening to it all, but the bottom line in my book is that people like to be with people they like. People like to be with people that they know and trust. And it goes well beyond just shaking hands. It means knowing each other. I think, like Chris was saying, knowing your brother a little bit deeper than just his name tag.
You know, Don's Lodge does this great event down in Montgomery. And I tell you what, you don't have to buy a pork burger from them. I think that's the least of their concern. The amount of fun that they have at that event is fantastic. And if the primary focus of any lodge should be the member, 100%, right? And those are conversations we have to have. Those are conversations our officers should be having at officer meetings. You know, these are discussions we need to stop avoiding and say what is working, what's not working, and how can we make this better, right? And forget about whose fault it is, how we got here, why it's here. None of that matters. And we're spending way too much time saying, you know, we need members than we are getting them. You know, how many lodges during this time in COVID? Now I understand the world's going on, a lot's going on, but there are a lot of lodges who officers are still meeting, who members are still meeting. Are those meetings valuable on Zoom? Are you guys saying what's going to happen when the Grand Master of Minnesota says you can do a degree? Are you guys ready? Are you ready for that first human being to walk through your lodge door when you haven't had somebody walk through that lodge door in the past 4 months? And are you organized to process him in? I mean, I would imagine that guy's looking for some human contact. Now, I understand not everybody's looking for human contact, but if he's coming to a lodge, he's looking for human contact. And what experience are we going to be giving that brother? We've had 3 or 4 years of Masonic shutdown, right? There's not 50 degrees going on, keeping us distracted and 30 different bodies. You know, none of this has happened, right? There's a few meetings here and there. People are getting together, but productivity, time, patience, and perseverance accomplishes all things. But if you're not working towards a goal, then none of it matters. You know, and not every meeting has to be to save the world, right? We need to also understand that it's that balance. It's that balance. I find it very interesting that brethren have trouble explaining Masonry. What is the definition of Masonry? You don't have to be a philosopher, but I hear a lot of people say, well, it's a brotherhood. You didn't tell me anything. Well, what does that mean to you? You know, explanation, communication is key for all of this.
I don't know if it's something that happened when I launched the poll once before, but I'm going to go ahead and relaunch it. It doesn't look it stayed up. So just to make sure that I get that out there. So excellent discussion, everyone.
Yeah, I may have led this thing in a different direction, but there's so many subjects as we can cover. Particularly on this thing as to what is a lodge and what did our lodge members do 100 years ago when they're busy running farms and such, and get to a lodge meeting, and our lodges too spread out, and are we really neighborhoods anymore? What? A lot of philosophical stuff. Besides everything else is seems to be running amok in the world these days. Anyway, it's good meeting with you guys.
No, I mean, you didn't take us off any course. It's a great discussion. Everybody's learning. I'm learning stuff. I mean, I'm looking at Shannon Krucklow over there, and he sent me some private messages. But no, we love participation. And this is what we're supposed to do. There's no, again, we're all doing it differently. And that's what we need to understand. And if you're not seeing the outcome you want, then you need to change. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. That doesn't make sense. You know, and I wouldn't necessarily say that Masonry is changing. Masonry is evolving. And the brotherhood is going to take it in the direction that they want to collectively. You know, there's a beyond the pancake breakfast. You know, we do a lot of those too, a lot of pancake breakfasts. You know,
just keeping. I was just going to add in a great presentation, fantastic discussion tonight. You know, and that really is delegation, right? The ability to sit down and have civil discourse and bounce things off of each other, and things will develop. And you know, it's I think it really reflects the importance of something we've all very much heard, and that's to use those working tools indiscriminately, but more especially that trowel. And that's really the art of delegation, is to, as had been mentioned tonight, emulate your brothers and who can properly work and properly agree. So thanks again for a great presentation, guys.
Well, that's Freemasonry.
You know, the one thing I would like to say is that art of delegation, looking at this, we have 16 brothers that are here as part of this, either speakers or brothers that are participating and listening. Here's an art of delegation. I challenge each of you for the next seminar, get someone else from your lodge that hasn't attended one to log in and watch it once. I challenge you to that. If you can really do good with delegation and trying to get 2, these things are really fulfilling educationally and help a lot of individuals in different areas. And each one of us knows that there is one or two key individuals that are coming up through the line or that just joined, that this kind of information might be exactly what they need, but we need to take it upon ourselves to try to get them to come to these.
Don't forget they're being recorded. So you can go back, you can go back and say, hey, there was a great presentation on this subject that I got to participate in. I think we should all watch it together. Replay it.
I'll definitely pass this on to the secretary and see how many more people we can get from Massachusetts in here.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, we don't want these things to run. Don't want these things to run too long.
And it's a testament, I think, both to the presenters and to the content that's being presented, that we began this presentation over an hour ago with 16 members. Here we are an hour later, we still have 16 members. So well done again to both Worshipful Brothers Justin and Chris. Excellent discussion. Again, I don't want to derail anything, but keep it on going.
Yep. Well, it's time to check out then.
Yes,
Bye,
thanks
everyone.
again, brothers.
Thank you.
One
Thanks,
quick
everyone.
question for Chris.
Have a great
you
night.
guys are flying through those slides. With those strengths and weaknesses as understanding your team, you said natural abilities, personal expertise, and then there was one more. Do you remember what that was?
Oh, motivation.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I thought I wrote it down right. Good. Okay. So, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that. So,
Thank you.
So well done, brothers. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for stepping up and providing this very needed presentation.
Thank you.
so absolutely. Everybody have a great night.
Have a great night.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody. Great job, guys.
Dude, I'm
Take care,
sorry.
everybody. We'll see you.
So I skipped a slide on Justin. Like, that was priceless. You're like, okay. And like, I didn't realize I did it. I'm at a brother's house. His freaking dog is going off. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm more focused on whether or not you guys can hear it. And so I'm going. And I clicked to come off of sharing. And I was like, oh shit, where'd the slide go? And I was like, all right, we're done.
Yep.
So I do apologize.
By the way, you're still being recorded, Chris, but
That's okay.
yeah, you did a
No
good
one-
job.
No one will get to this part.
Oh, good. Even better.
If we look